We started off this conversation very interesting. You sitting in over there, because we're doing this one over the phone, listening to me, listen to all my different news and media sources. And, for a second I thought like, oh, wow, he's just listening in right now. He's just trying to get some inside intel.
Yeah.
What's going on?
It was so funny because I could see you, I could hear what was going on your end, and I could just see that you were really involved in that. And I kept waving, clapping, yelling, and I was like, okay, maybe you send me a message. Let me go on Instagram. and then I saw you said, I sent you the Zoom. I was like, well, I'm on the Zoom. But it was interesting though, because those moments when people don't think they're watching, you can really tell a lot about them. And I'm afraid to tell you, you're not the shady person you present yourself to be. So you're kind of a good guy. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. I think everybody thinks I'm a nice guy or a good person. It's more of me, that inner ego that just tells you, like, hey, you're not a good person. You're not doing enough. You could be doing so much more. And there's really not enough you could potentially doing. But, I'm here today with Tyler Rockson, keynote speaker, author. And what other titles are you going by these days?
Well, I always describe myself as a consultant, writer, speaker, whose mission is to really teach people how to connect across cultures. So, but I do a lot of things in the creative world. It's what got, much like you do, and then led to speaking, which led to consulting and coaching. And I've been writing since I was 15, and I'm 29 now, about to be 30. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, October, right?
October, look at you. Yeah, October 30. Yeah.
Those concussions won't let me down, man. They're not going to knock me down. Recall, I don't even know what to compare that to.
Well, I certainly hope that, they don't. You play basketball, so I don't know, were concussions a big deal in basketball? I know it's more with football and boxing.
No, I'm just that lunatic on the floor going, short guy. And then once you get by even bigger and stronger guys, once you hit that professional level, you get bounced off like a ping pong ball even more, especially, the faster you move, the higher you jump. Yeah. That momentum equation, my favorite one in physics, mass times velocity, it's just big for equal more and more power. And so, I just took some tumbles, gotten some scraps on the court. And, you always put your beak every which way you can on the court. And when you put your beak in places you shouldn't, bam. Yeah. Just got hits. And they just stacked up. And now it just was time to start something new. So here I am in this creative world and creative space.
Look, I'm so looking forward to the day we get your book and we do your podcast, because I'm fascinated with the basketball aspect of your life, that particular version in your life, and the hustle, the games, the playing, the preparation it took there. Because like I told you when we met in person, I think it's a great metaphor for life itself. But there's an interesting parallel that sports has when you dive into that. But don't let me get into this nerdy aspect of myself. But
it's not nerdy. If anything, more guys like me need to hear this, especially athletes, especially moving in life after sports. A lot of guys who go from this. There's life was one way. They really don't know how to harness and harbor those skills that they had. And you made that point, how great sports is. And I'm not a third culture kid, TCK, something you are, and you harbor on, connecting with a lot of those individuals around the world is, being dropped off and dropped in so many different places, like in South Florida, when I grew up playing basketball, my mom dropped me off in this area, Martin Luther King Center. And I didn't think anything of it. It was just the Martin Luther King Center, and I'm playing basketball with these guys,
Yeah.
So, little rough area and rough neighborhood, walking through my friends' places to the projects. I was 9 years old, just like it was nothing, and having that, availability at that young age, you still kind of already written down in your mind all your, biases and, your thoughts and how you perceive the world. But it really helped me, really not look at the world in any shape or form. Like, oh, this is just a guy and this is just a girl over here. And together we're either going to play basketball, I'm going to do this with them or not. And it was really interesting that as a young man, how that helped shape me. And to, look at people and want to go travel and see the world. And once I did go travel, I don't really practice Judaism, but after going and living in Israel, becoming a citizen, didn't finish that process, and then wanting to go live in Kuwait, my family and friends were just You are going, what?
Yeah.
Insane?
Where? Whoa! Don't do that. What are you gonna do to yourself? Don't you know your heritage?
I thought I had done enough crazy things for my family to say, okay, Brandon's just going off to this part of the world now. But they were just like, we can't even tell you to be careful at this point. What are you doing?
I know it's so interesting what happens when you really expose yourself to the world and when you find that common ground, because you're like, wait, I was taught this, but everybody really just has this one common goal to live and to protect their family and just
Feel
to enjoy.
love.
Yeah, love, feel love. We all want that.
Oh, man.
So interesting with that. Yeah, for sure. Ah, yeah. And I think the same thing for me always happened. I remember I grew up Christian. So when we first moved to Burkina Faso, which is a French-speaking country in West Africa, and Nigeria is an English-speaking country, so it was, the story I always tell is skinny Nigerian kid with thick Nigerian accent in a French-speaking country in an American international school going through puberty. And what happens in international schools is you have diplomatic kids, you have missionary kids, and you have a bunch of people from different backgrounds. So there were a bunch of missionary kids that I really connected with, which is they introduced me to the game of basketball. One in particular, Michael Albright, and he invited me to youth group. And my mom, my poor mom, who I love so much, she hadn't really heard of what youth group was. I had never heard of it too, but it's just then you bring a lot of people from, that are believers, and they go meet up. And she would not let me go for the longest because she thought it was a cult. It was like, no, you're not going to go anywhere. What are you doing? I'm just going. You think I'm going to leave you by yourself with all these kids? I've never seen them before. And it took a while for me to be like, Mom, we're a bunch of Christians. We're going to read the Bible. And then we'll maybe sing some songs. And then we'll come back home. It's really just 10 minutes there. It's like, but it was just this cultural thing where in Nigeria, a lot of times the parents are they want to know everything you're doing, especially at that young of an age. And the idea of that freedom of expression is like, where you're going to learn things that I've never taught you. And that could pollute your mind,
Mm-hmm.
Get that way. So just on that small level, I remember having to deal with that.
Yeah, definitely can see that, in American history, and just, a lot of people want to think, American history starts at 1945. If we look, but we'll just talk about that on the scale economically, after, this rise to, whatever you want to call it, different industries that provided America with a lot of success to be on this global level economically and socially. And yeah, just, hey, kids ran outside, they could do what they want, they could be what they want. And this like protection of saying, hey, few kids get kidnapped or these things happen. It seems like we believe that the world, I mean, maybe in the United States, this world is a bubble. We have these two oceans that still really keep us, cut off from the world in terms of, whether it's war, a lot of, even disease and the way it could spread, is that, we think that nothing ever bad's going to happen, and we don't even want to put it in our minds. And when it does, we set ourselves up for like just a big explosion over here.
Yeah.
When something does happen, and those news and media sources really play well on our worst fears, which is really for us anything here.
Well, if you think about it, I think the media's played a big role in defining our fears. I mean, you and I are like essentially the same age, and the big thing that happened during our time was 9/11, right? That was the big thing. I remember where I was. We had, since Burkina Faso is ahead of the United States, we had just gone out of school, but I think it was early in the morning here. But that, when you think about all the movies that came out of that, the comedy jokes and everything, when you started to hear like a Muslim prayer or Assalamu alaikum or any of these things that were remotely Arabic, you started to see this fear rise, because in the movies that meant the person was about to do something bad. Or if someone's on a plane and someone has a turban or a head wrap or a hijab, you start to say, and you hear all these stories, and I'm like, wait, when did this become like a big fear? Who essentially defined that? What movies? And I was like, yeah, this is in every movie, every TV show, every recording where you paint a broad stroke and define a whole group of people basically as potentially terrorists. And so your senses are heightened, and you just see that all the time. And I have a lot of Muslim friends who will tell you that after that, their classmates started to react differently. You know, Assam Minaj, the comedian, he said that was when someone came to his house and they like stoned the window or something, and, you know, and like something to the effect of go back to your country, which is very reminiscent of of recent events here. But all these things are, you know, they feed into our worst biases. But I find that when we feed into those biases without getting to work through them or even understanding why we think that way, we just automatically default to our worst impulses, and it's just horrible because it's dehumanizing.
Well, I mean, if it could relate to anything, I think it would be something biologically, or just, you know, people are doing this because they have fear.
Oh my
And
gosh,
the
yeah.
way they can, again, it's misguided fear, I believe. You know,
Okay.
where is this coming from? Is every person like this? Again, there
Mm-hmm.
are evil people, but where can I set the balance and to look at a complete stranger? But I mean, you know, just 500 years ago, tomorrow, some people could run up over a hill and find your village or your town, and it might be burned to the ground.
It's true.
And I
Yeah.
mean, it takes so long evolutionarily to break down. I mean, just like those little things in your head. I mean, we talk about um, with inner city moms, the amount of stress and trauma that's passed on to somebody who's something they're carrying in their womb, and that stress gets passed on to them. And I mean, that aggression or whatever, you know, harmful tendencies that come from being a very high stress life, we're passing that down hereditarily. We're able to, you know, understand that that happens now. So getting people that have already gone through maybe even more crazy time, crazy stress as adults and as human beings that already didn't have those things passed down to them from their families, you know, I like everybody. I think everybody feels this way, and that's a big, big, big inference right there. I'm going to point that out. That everybody wants to see the change. They don't not just want to see the change they want to be in the world, but they want it to happen now. They want to happen in their lifetime. They don't want to win
Yeah.
on those little small victories
Yeah.
that happen, because I think we're living in the most inclusive time that's ever been around in history. It's the most inclusive. You know, you want to say
Hmm.
that it's definitely not where we want it. You know, this is just a linear movement pattern. Hopefully it stays linear and hopefully it keeps going up. However, I mean, we could say what's going up, what's going down right now. However, when we get it to this point, where do we get it to? You know, because I think a lot of people don't even understand the word inclusive. I'm not
You
even going to say it right.
inclusive. I would say for your inclusivity. I don't know.
Thank you.
I mean, I know you say we are in the most inclusive time. I mean, I hope you're right. I'm not sure, but I have to do more research.
What time would be a little bit more like as in a
No,
world?
no, as in, yeah, because their stats show this is the safest time ever, and that's true. But you know what inclusiveness means to me? It's the ability to be yourself without judgment. When you can do that in the workplace, when you can do that at school, you can do that in your friend group, because you got to think about inclusiveness from a political, societal level, and social level, right? You know, can you go out without someone joking about something of your culture, heritage, and it's like I can't. Oh, if I say something, you're being too sensitive or PC. Is it politically, against your interest to say something? Because if you say one word, you're like saying the enemy. What about institutionally? You know, all these things. And so, what I'm noticing, especially when I talk to more people of color, people that are in different backgrounds, or people in the LGBTQ community, where we have, you know, certain people who have not had the ability or the platforms to express themselves until now. And then when they do that, sometimes, you know, you still have the traumas that you have to relive through everyday everyday experiences. Something in the news, something that used to be said as a joke before, like the F word, referring to the people in the LGBTQ community, and then coming up, or comedy, or just going to a bus sign, or hearing a political leader say something. I just don't know that we do enough to acknowledge that, because every time I bring these things up, what I always hear is, "Well, your generation, man, back in my day, we could just say anything. We had tough kids."
I
And
love laughing at your accent. The joke is good too, but your accent was fantastic.
thank you. And I always push back and say, wait, do you want to get back to insulting people? It's not like that. That's not what I'm saying. But, we just used to take things. And I'm like, we used to take things, but now we have people who are more willing to express themselves. And so if they tell us that they are not fine with that, we should be able to move past that and not fight for that. So maybe to your point, yes, it is more inclusive in that sense, where in the past, if you had said something, you could have been potentially hanged or killed. Yeah, but it's just it's why I wrote the book, because I feel like we don't know how to connect enough. And I think that's really all what humans want to do. They want to connect to themselves and connect to others. And when we are at a disconnect with our highest selves, we just become the worst versions. And then when we don't have people to connect to, we become like lonely and just we start to do horrible things. I think about incels. I didn't even know what incels was until like was it a year or two ago, when I was doing a masculinity speech, and I need to look it up to make sure I understand the definition. But it's something about celibate men who are really angry, at not getting attention from women, and then it's this crazy thing. Okay, incels are,
Oh, the incels. Oh yeah. I mean,
members of an online subculture who define themselves as unable to find a romantic partner or sexual partner despite desiring one. And so, they say they're largely white, almost exclusively male heterosexuals. But it goes across those lines. And I was like, how are we going to channel this loneliness and this thing into something hateful? So there's no guide to explain to people how to just move past that
yeah.
fear, ignorance, and hate. So yeah.
Well, I mean, you mentioned and my point going off of this being the most inclusive time, because everybody has a soapbox now. Almost everybody. I think there's a lot of people that don't have their voices heard. That's the most unique thing, I maybe it's the optimist in me that says, hey, these aren't like, terrible times. These are just these are like puberty times, everybody just shuffling
Growing
shoulders
pain.
now, knee pain happening, what was it? I mean, we'd like to think we're so sophisticated humans, but you go to the doctor and we're looking at x-rays and you see a space between your bones, like, oh, this is room for growth here. Like, we still look at things like in such a
Yeah.
like rudimental way.
Yeah.
And the fact that everybody has that soapbox is great. And the fact is, it's not great when you hear those insults and reactions, but it's still it's the community or the culture just doesn't exist still, that someone comes out and they say, hey, this is how I feel,
Yeah.
pussy. Oh, you're this. Sorry, I can't skate around, like you said, with the F word and the LGBT. You said that so well right there. Like,
Oh no, I'm trying. Look, I don't want to, yeah, but I still have a lot to learn myself. Trying not to. I don't want to trigger anyone, because I always want to be mindful of that. But sometimes you're right. If you want, it can be hard to explain if you don't say it, if someone doesn't know what the F word is. But I know what you're saying. Yeah.
everybody like wants to insult you right back because they don't believe, what you're saying, has any place. It's not a sign of strength. And I'm
Yeah.
learning this too, because I'm the worst at this, being vulnerable
Yeah.
on just any facet. Like, I am just terrible at it. I can't even give myself a victory or give somebody else a compliment or pat on the back. But apparently that, like, again, see, I just even said it right there. Apparently, no, it's just a real sign of strength, just being able to tap into that and to express
It
that,
is.
and whether you're doing that through storytelling or having someone know that, hey, what this person doing is a sign of courage and a sign of bravery. But
Yeah.
we want to, the next wave of evolution, I think, is just not going to be something, physically. We're changing people's bodies, getting them faster and stronger, but it's going to be something like, not spiritually too, or
I
either,
think so. I think spiritually too. Yeah.
it's, trying to get everybody, we're not thinking about countries anymore. We're thinking about like wavelengths of everybody on the planet working towards the same direction. Like, hey,
Yeah.
we are, the planet, and we will all want, but it's so hard to get everybody not to think the same way, but to be working towards that common thing. Because I mean, that's the idea with, that's the battle of ideas right now.
It
We
is.
say that, hey, if you're Donald Trump, you have no good intention at all. You are racist. You are this and that. And then if you are Omar or AOC, no, you are just ruining this country and you're trying to make it the worst place ever. And you only have evil intentions. And it's
Yeah.
just this battle of, hey, what do I think is a good idea?
Yeah.
And some of those things are exclusive. They are exclusive to certain groups. Or I think even this movement of, inclusivity. I can't say the S.
Inclusivity.
Inclusivity. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that how do we how do we make it work for both parties? Because, are we being exclusive when we tell the majority to deal with it, when all we're trying to do with being inclusive is saying, hey, everybody has a platform, everybody has a voice.
Yeah.
And because again, it's that old idea that everybody just gets scared. Oh, no. If there's, a black superhero, oh no, black superhero, it's over, it's done. But
Oh, Black Little Mermaid.
God,
um,
I just got back into Twitter. It's fantastic, but it's also just you'll get sucked up.
so it's interesting for me because yeah, I share your optimism. I've always had. I'm always energetic. I always describe myself. I think I describe myself more as an angry optimist. I'm an optimist with a mission, and I'm reminding people of our better instances. I do honestly feel like we default to the easiest emotion, right? It's easier to fear, to hate, and to react that way, but it's harder to love and to find common ground. And that might sound like a complex thing for people to say, but I have noticed it is harder to love because loving involves releasing your ego and understanding that you might not be right. And the idea that you might not be right or your way might not be the only way is something that many of us have not reconciled with for the longest times. Whether it's with men understanding that women need more space to be free, the old ways of flirting don't work, or whether it's people in the workplace in Silicon Valley understanding that there needs to be more diverse ideas in the room, and it's not just a boys club that looks like a certain demographic and like, whoa, you're going to take our jobs. It's not that. We live in a world of nuance governed by binary systems, to take your point, where we're in a world of extremes. And so I always think it always starts internally. Every one of us, we have to look internally to see where that hole in the bone, between the bones, are. Where is our room for growth? What are our biases? What are our values? Are we living those things out? And then what are our biases that we can work through? We just need to be honest with ourselves. And then when we start with from that place, we start to see, okay, this is what I need to do in order to expose myself and normalize those type of experiences. And as I do that, I can start to expand my worldview. Traveling for you, as I imagine, expose you to a different world than you would never have been exposed to if you had stayed, in one place. But that's the amazing thing of what experiencing different worlds can do to you. You could hear from other people informed by their biases, or you can experience other people informed by your experiences. And that's a subtle difference, right? It's just something that it's not practiced. And when you're in a world that you haven't really had to fight for your freedom much, it's easy for you to hear resistance and think that that's just troublemaking, or it's just like people not buying into meritocracy or people being lazy. And I think that's just kind of where we are in this type of world, where, as Mark Maron once said, he says he thinks there's one political party whose motto is never apologize, and then the other motto of the other political party is you can basically never forgive. So never apologize versus never forgive. One is looking for a perfect candidate, and one is just without, I don't care, I'm just going to be unapologetic for who I am. And it's hurting both parties.
No, I mean, you say this in one of your talks, and I think you're fantastic at doing this yourself, is finding that voice that can reach both majority and minorities, like I say, in people and in politics. You have my vote, for whatever, system you run for. You got to finish your book, or you have to put the book out, and then we'll talk.
Yeah, I'll put the book. I don't know. Ironically, I don't even think I'm good in politics. I think I'm better in this field we're in, because I feel like I'll be stifled. One of my biggest values is freedom. And for the longest time, I had this big identity crisis. I didn't know I wasn't like enough of anything. And so as I grew older and channeled all those insecurities, it became more helping people become who they are. So I always say, use your difference to make a difference. It was more about that. And I feel like if I'm in politics, I might have to concede a few aspects of myself, like your values here or your thoughts here. So I don't know. I like the private sector.
Well, tell me about your experience. You're an African man, and coming into America, and then also dealing with African Americans. I'm sure, were you accepted? Were you brought in, taken in? Were you sought out? Like you said, you had this identity crisis. I know you didn't always live in America.
Right. Yeah, I've lived in Nigeria, Vietnam, Sweden, Burkina Faso, United States, and the differences really started in Burkina Faso. There, I only grown up in a predominantly, Black nation before, but we had, a rich culture of a different sort. English is the official language, but there are over 250 ethnic groups. And my tribe was, is rather Nigeria. Is Yoruba. And so I'm a Yoruba guy. And I remember coming to, to Burkina Faso, and the thing was, my accent was funny. My food smelled weird. I didn't play all the sports that they played. I only played, what I called football, but they call soccer, I guess, so soccer. And so I had to learn, in order to fit in, I had to learn basketball, which ultimately became my favorite sport, basketball. I fell in love with tennis, which is my other sport. And then obviously, soccer will always be right there with me. And so I learned that, and that was a way to fit in. I had to, I was like, I found myself changing different parts of my voice. I became really good at mimicking voice, different accents from different regions.
It's funny. I'm pretty decent at that too.
Yeah.
Accents, or just like listening so closely to someone talk.
Yeah.
Okay, let me turn this frequency in my head and my mind, or pinch this vocal cord.
Yeah.
And I can, replicate that voice.
I can see it too, and I understand why. And it was something I started to get really good at in order to make sure to fit in, because at that age you don't want to stand out. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do. It was already a very small school. It was about 120 people from pre-K to 12. Like everybody knew everybody, so I didn't. So what I did was, in order to mask my insecurities, I became this jokester and the athlete. So I was like, I was just joking. Anything happened, I would just laugh it off or do histrionics. I'm already a goofy person, but I accentuated it even more, just so that people, I wanted people to know me for something, and that was the one way. And it made me feel less vulnerable. The more challenging one, I think, though, was when I came back to Nigeria. I went to Hogwarts. I went to boarding school. And I wasn't Nigerian enough anymore. And this was from 10th to 12th grade. And that was it was challenging because I am Nigerian. right. And to be made to feel like you're a hidden immigrant is just a weird feeling, because that's the only passport I have. And it wasn't even like I was like seen as a lower person. I was a higher, sometimes like, oh, this guy has got an American accent now, and he plays basketball, plays all the sports. He's really cool. And I was put on this weird pedestal. I just wanted to be on this. And then in the boarding school, the boys stay in one area and the girls stay in one area. So I was in the boys' dorm, and I was just hitting puberty, and the boys hated me, and the girls started to, for the first time in my life, pay attention to me. And so I remember coming back home one time, because I was a little bigger than most of the boys in my class. They couldn't physically bully me, but they had cut up all my shorts and my clothes and put up lotion on them. And I was like, wow, it was still to this day, I don't know who did it, but the CEO of the school had to come take me and had me live in her house for like the weekend, because I had just literally come into the school and this was my experience. And she was like, oh no, we can't have this new kid spreading, bad things. We need to make sure he has a good experience. But that was my initial experience. It was almost like this weird hazing thing that they had to do, but except they couldn't physically do anything to me, but they wanted to psychologically break me down and be like, you are not one of us. And even though those people like you, you don't have to live with them. You live with us. But finding the strength to be myself there was really when I decided what I'm doing right now. I think it was at the age of 17, I decided to just stop trying to fit into everyone's idea, because I realized I'll keep changing. So going from that pendulum swing of trying to fit into, I guess, a Western way of what the world considers beautiful, to trying to be accepted in my way, that's really what informed me to really try and be unapologetically, myself, and be vulnerable. And you'll see a lot of times in my stories, I dance when I dance, I share when I share. I love my cartoons as much as my superhero stories, as much as talking about random thing. And I'm not afraid to be, a heterosexual man who is an ally for the LGBTQ community. I'm not afraid to dress up in whatever way, I guess suits, or I guess, what do they call it? Metrosexuals, like David Beckham. I don't know, people that wear stuff. I have no idea. And I'm not afraid of what people will call me, because I know who I am. And that took a while for me to get there. And then I eventually came to America for school, and people just would not believe that I was Nigerian. It was just like, your English is too good. There's no way. Like, how can you be so articulate? But you know, the
Do you
freedom
think
I
that
had
was a
in
knock on you being from Africa, or did you feel like that was like a, a bias that other people had?
it was a combination of both. As you said, a lot of people think the history starts in 1945. A lot of people think Black history starts with slavery here. A lot of people don't actually understand that there's a big world outside. And so their perception of what Africa is sometimes reduced to a country or an exaggerated stereotype or caricature of some commercial appears after midnight to save the kids. And so the idea that someone from a country in Africa, Nigeria, could wear clothes and operate in an English world was a little perplexing from them. And I didn't understand that until it became teachers and roommates and people that I would think would know these things that were asking me questions. But I mean, but it plays into to some extent, I guess you can understand if everybody comes to America or the West for in their mind, they've like everybody comes here for success. So why do I need to understand the world? Hollywood is here, the music industry is here, pop culture is defined here according to the world. So there's nothing else in the world except us. You become very ethnocentric. But all those combination of things really evolved into me just sharing my stories, which by virtue of doing that, I started to have a community of people who started to email me privately and say, "Hey, I grew up the same way. Thank you for saying that. I didn't know how to articulate that the way you did, but that was my experience." And then I said, maybe there's something here. And then I started doing what I do.
Yeah, it's a big thing on my message of what I want to do and who I want to be is,
Right.
I really, really want Americans in particular to really understand their place in the world. And we have such a big responsibility, I believe, that, you can't be ethnocentric in this time. You can't think that, what happens in some place in Florida or some place in Missouri or New York, even think New York City dwellers, like they just don't understand their importance to the rest of the world. I mean, I remember I tell a story. I coaching these girls, and some of them, had hijabs on. This is in Kuwait,
Oh, wait.
and it's all girls class, and I'm a man, and these girls, are 12, 13 years old, and it's like, how standoffish, how close. I mean, these things are always had to run through your mind. It's just the culture, and something you had to do. It wasn't, like everybody thought, hey, death tribunal coming because you stared or like you accidentally touched one of them, to teach them something. It was
Right.
more, and I had this girl, and she's asking me because Coachella is going on. And this is a 12, 13-year-old girl. Coach Brandon, do you know Coachella? You're like, yeah, I know Coachella. I have a bunch of friends. They're probably there right now. Oh my God, you know these people. And like something so small as like people in America attending a music festival and these artists coming there to perform a
Yeah.
certain style of music or portray a certain message of what their brand is or what's going on in the world that they don't see as right or they see as right or as wrong is it's just insane in the way the world is connected today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, just to see people how great they have it, how great they have it here, and still, I mean, that is the flaw and fault of just being human itself.
Of
Whether
course.
things are as great or as bad as they are, we really don't get to reflect and see, the incredible things that we get to do and how that ripple effect we have as American citizens to the world.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid of, I mean, I don't know if I shared, I grew up in two dictatorships before we started traveling, but so I spent the first 9 years of my life in a dictatorship where there was a lot of censorship. But once we had access to TV, we wanted to know everything about America.
How
You
long
know,
did that dictatorship go? It was in Nigeria, correct?
Oh yeah, so Nigeria's had dictators for a long period of time, way before I was born. We got our independence in 1960, and then we had maybe a brief civilian rule, and there was several military juntas and coups and counter coups.
Yeah.
But when I was born in '89. It was '89 to '99, and then we transitioned to civilian rule. So and it was just and now we've maintained that, but.
You guys developed a great counterculture out of the music-wise, out of the
Oh my
military
gosh.
dictatorship.
Oh
I'm a
my
big
gosh.
Fela Kuti fan, so
Yeah,
uh,
Fela Kuti. That's my dad's favorite. Fela Kuti is a revolutionary in that sense, and there were a lot of literal literature novelists who really came out. Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, all these people who are great. But what I was trying to say was that once we got access to TV, it was what's happening in New York. Like New York is the place. What's happening in New York and maybe LA and sometimes, Chicago, or when Will Smith came out with Welcome to Miami, like Miami's cool too. But but I'm serious. And then even when I went to Burkina Faso, it was always every person that comes that's not an American, they study American or Western culture in addition to their culture by just like a way to, because they want to find a way to fit in. That's just how that is. It's not the other way around, where you study your culture in addition to other countries' culture. So I think that's where, the disconnect is. It's just, there's that curiosity because you want to maybe to make sure that you show you belong to and you understand this and all that. So yeah.
Do you think 9/11 like just really played a role at reversing the way we want to portray a message around the world? Because I think before that,
Oh,
you talk about like Radio Free Europe, everything, in the Cold War, and you'd see like I think that was one of the big defactors of communism in Russia. Is like once they had TV or they're hearing over the radio, Radio Free Europe. I had a guy who used to work with them, James Kirchick out of Yale, and works at the Brookings Institution now for foreign policy, and you're just sending these messages, whether it's pop culture, whether it's in music. And then once people finally started getting TV and getting the signal and say, oh, wait, we're practicing this thing over here and living like this, and they're living like this over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about this message that we're doing. And then it happens, and you see this total reverse of just, hardship, military, heavy military,
Right.
the way in order to exemplify your message, whether it's economically or socially, culturally, it's through military strength. And I think we're still in that, like, we're going almost 20 years now, but like, that's the message that we're still trying to portray.
Yeah.
Our way or the highway kind of thing.
I definitely think that's still the message. I think even before 9/11, that was the message. It was just, it became, I just noticed like even greater height and sense of urgency to find someone to blame, right? If you remember 9/11, there was the war and we're going to, find, we're going to, if we have to start a war, we're going to find that person. And then it was interesting with that because we as humans, we need something to believe in, right? And if you put a face on an enemy and you rally a troop of people against that, you have a galvanizing force that can be unstoppable. Look at the George Bush elections. I mean, it was based off of a lot of those things.
I mean, God did want him to invade. I mean, God talked to him.
There you go. And you say that, and obviously, I always love when people can rally around something and people can make sure that they unite to fight evil. But then I always want people to caution themselves, that is, are you quick to believe something because you need hope, or are you going to investigate that? The same thing with the 2016 elections.
No, the reactionaries are way too fast.
It's so fast. Like, because the things that people were saying in 2016 elections that won the election, I was like, these things are actually not, it's not logical for Cole to be, you're not going to keep the job no matter what anyone's saying. We're moving towards automated all these things, but people that felt heard just felt like this person hears us, so we're going to vote for him. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It really didn't matter. You had to believe in this person over the other person. And that's a very scary place that we as humans can get, when we need to believe someone and someone knows how to tap into that emotion and basically say, this is the reason for all your mishap. Then you become a pawn in a lot of people's games. And I always want people to be mindful of that. I think what we don't practice enough of is critical thinking in today's world. I mean, it's just what it is. We just don't understand why we believe what we believe and why we act the way we act. We just operate based on the things we've been conditioned to do, and we don't challenge those conditionings, which is dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's where this upcoming election is going to be really interesting. That whether it's Trump continuing what he's doing, the 20 or so different Democratic candidates who are battling and vying for that spot, because if I look at things on a very black and white scale. I'll say like, hey, how many people are here and how many people are here? So the majority of people are white people. Well, how many people are voting, or how many people are Trump going after to say, hey, I'm white, you're white, you should vote for me? And how many on and let's say I think it's 60 or 70% of the population is still a majority of white, or maybe I think it's probably less now because the Latino population is, or was predicted even passed by this 2020 census coming up right now, or to be the largest minority, and then all these different groups. And I think people look at it funny when they say like, hey, why are you going after or putting such a strong message on people that don't rack up or mark up a large percentage of the population? What about me? What about this? Why aren't you covering my message? I feel left out. I feel this. I feel that. This guy's saying the things I want to hear. And I think it's just only making it more polarizing to this fact. I think relying on a person, a leader. I mean, no one can, let's say, manage, we'll call it, 350 million people. I mean, the fact that we're like, we're just looking at a few ideas, like how ancient those ideas are. Oh, there's space between your bones. You're going to grow a little bit more. Like, hey, even the way we look at things, God told me to go to war. I mean, that's Constantine right there, the year 315 in the Byzantine Empire. Like, hey, God spoke to me. I saw a cross. We're all Catholic now, and we're all converting. I mean, we're not so disconnected and far off. And the fact that, that we can hear all these messages now, we forget the idea that we're still dealing with people.
Yeah, that's
And
the thing.
people don't move like the technology or the ideas. We're still dealing with people, and it's so hard to see progress and change in people.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. We are dealing with people, and if you look back throughout any history, and I say this in the book, but I say throughout history, our biggest flaw has been our inability to handle differences. Right, the cause of any war is because of anyone that's different religion, different tribe, different skin color, different soccer football team, whatever, different tribe, or anything that was just different. And so the way we've reacted throughout that in history is to either eliminate them, squash them, divide them, make sure that we find a way to rule, force assimilation, cause this different things. And it's happened across every level of social, religion or politics, every political level, those things like that. And I've studied that for most of my life, why we feel that uncomfortable with difference. And it's just, I think we feel threatened a lot of times. We feel like that, they're going to take away something of ours, whether it's imagined or real. And it puts you in a place where you feel like you have to fight for something. And when you find something that you have to fight for, that can be masked as purpose, right? It's like, this is my my purpose, and I have to make sure that this way is the only way. And because if it's the only way, I'm actually doing them a favor. I mean, and as I'm doing them a favor, their generations will thank me for this. It's just, that's where we get there. And now we don't have extreme levels of that in some places, but if we don't check ourselves, that's where you have those chants that you heard recently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are the lost generation as millennials.
Oh gosh, here we go.
I kind of like to call ourselves that, the lost generation. That generation who was just handed the internet and said, "Hey, here you go. This dial-up thing, this DSL, and now it's just in the pocket of your hand, and figure out what to do with it."
Mm-hmm.
And my parents have no idea kind of what I do for work. I mean, they just can't. They're not old by any sorts or means, but there's like, okay, wow, that's great you're doing that. I have no idea what a microphone, and your podcast comes up on my phone now, and I watch your videos, and you're, collecting bottles and cans with, people who subsidize their income on this. Like, okay, how do you make money?
Same.
And, it's such a going to be, I think, a fruitful time, in 10, 20 years. I'd like to think,
I believe so.
We were this generation, and then nothing really happened. They got lost in, whether their ways, not the term sold out, because that's a stretch. But, when we get into these executive positions and powers and companies, I'd like your opinion on this. When millennials do, I think that millennials under them, that Gen Z, are just going to see so many different levels of where money is going to be spent and distributed. Not just in executive roles in companies or just in businesses themselves, but just, the ideas that are going to be put forth. Hey, we had the internet. We know what we're doing. We kind of got an idea and grasp of this. We think, money should be spent here. Because like you said, we're still dealing with a very old way of and again, that goes, not just in politics, that's in a lot of film and in media. Like, hey,
Yeah.
why do we need a black cowboy? I mean, we had enough cowboys, but like again, it's thinking outside that message. It's thinking
Yeah.
outside of like, hey, how does this only affect me? Thinking about that ripple effect to
Yeah.
not even just the rest of the world, but now you got to think a generation or two. The next people who are going to watch this, consume this ideas. What are they going to think of it? What can they do with it?
So my greatest hero, unfortunately, I couldn't meet him, but it was the late great Nelson Mandela, and I started studying him when we were in a dictatorship, just because he was the closest person to look like me in terms of color who was fighting for something. I was like, oh, there's hope. We can actually. I wasn't sure we'd ever get out of a dictatorship. It's just sort of gotten used to the suppression of rights, and so as I studied him and I saw what he did, the idea of coming back to coming out from jail, letting go of his hate and really seeking reconciliation and the bigger picture of understanding how white South Africans and black South Africans have to work together. I was like, how do you get to this place after being 27 years in jail and you're not bitter? And what I really learned was the importance of big picture thinking from him. And I liken that to our generation of Gen Zers. When it comes to climate change, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and all these things that are easily going to affect us in the future, in the near future, but the effects are not, immediately felt. I've noticed a lot of people just seem to pass it off to be like, that's tomorrow's issue. And because of that lack of sense of urgency, we ignore it. But by ignoring it, we actually heighten the consequences. We're in the hottest summer now in New York. This is a heat wave. We just had a blackout.
I will not come back there. Like,
Yeah,
we
exactly.
had breakfast a few weeks ago. It's like, oh man, it's 80 degrees here right now. It doesn't like get above 80. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, but even this thing, the Haiti, but it feels like 100 because of the humidity, and it's all that. But those things are the things our generation. I feel like when we get into positions of power, we'll invest in, because we know that despite being called, the baby generation and the entitled generation, that we can see that it's our kids that are going to get affected, right? It's literally our kids, or we could be affected in the twilight zones of our years. So if we don't start, picking up the mic, recording ourselves, going to places to pick bottles up like you do, and educating people and really teaching people about a sense of urgencies, there's no one else that will do it. It's not the government that's in place that will do this. It has to start from us. And so that's the change I'm watching. I don't even think it's us waiting to be in positions of power. I think what the internet has done is given us a platform to use your word to just educate people and to take action into our own hands. I mean, that's the great equalizer in today's world. It's the great equalizer and also the great divider, the internet sometimes. But I believe it does more good than bad. I'm not on the side that thinks the internet is the worst thing in the world. The internet is the reason I have the job I have. But yeah, so I think that's where our generation. I'm just rambling at this point, but I think that's where our generation, as we take positions of leadership, should start looking towards how we can connect across cultures based on our passions, and how we can use those solutions to show people that they can do the same in their environments.
Why is I'm gonna just butcher it.
We're gonna do this. See, think of the word inclusive,
Inclusive,
and then inclusivity. Just
inclusivity.
You got inclusivity.
There goes my good, serious, hardening question.
Well, the question I believe
why is inclusivity and diversity, especially in the workplace, why is that important, and like how is that merge and bridge people across cultures?
Because we are becoming more, like to your point, we're becoming more diverse. We're more multicultural. You brought up the demographics of Hispanics rising even more, and all these different backgrounds. We're now in a workplace where there are potentially 5 generations. You have different gender identities, and for some people, some generations didn't grow up with the same gender identities, and people have different mindsets, and people have different ways of thinking. And so the diversity and inclusion for me is much more than the external things. It's a lot of the internal, what goes on inside us. But if you have all this combination of people working together or going to school together, and you have one style of leadership, it's a very dangerous thing to have, because you're in the business of leading people. And if you're in the business of leading people that you don't understand, you're going to have a high turnover because no one will want to stay at your company. You're going to lose sales and profits, which will affect the bottom line of your company. But you're also going to have positions where even if people stay because they have to pay off loans, they're not going to be the most motivated and they're going to be miserable. And you work for most of your life. And so you're going to be creating a miserable workplace environment that has a horrible reputation. I mean, you saw what almost happened to Uber before, Travis was kicked out. It was despite how fast the company was growing, there were increasing rumbles of sexual harassment or things like that were going underneath there. It doesn't matter how well the company is doing; people are still getting affected, and they needed to drastically change their leadership because they were afraid of what the whole company could do or crumble.
How,
So
how
that's
does a
one.
business do that? Like deal with the sexual harassment, especially, wouldn't say with the upticks. I don't think it's been any more. I think it's just a more and more reporting than it
Reporting,
had been
yes, yeah,
ever. So I
yeah,
mean, how does a company, for example, deal with this? Because as you said, there's like a hard repercussion now of not
yeah.
just like, hey, turmoil in the office, but sales, reputation, brands being destroyed.
Well, companies have to make it clear and known that uh, this type of behavior is not accepted, and when this happens, you can come here without consequence. In the past, people haven't known where to go to. You know, people have been afraid that if they talk, they'll be the one that's ostracized, and people have enabled people. And so, when you're having orientation, when you're giving the company values, you need to explicitly say this is not acceptable and no one is above ground, and this is always a safe space. Have a reporting structure in place where it's clear, everybody knows that that's what's happening, and there's no consequence of loss of job unless there's due process and investigation, things like that. And
And
in the
what kind of
past,
behavior are we talking about? Because I think these men and women, or even women and women and men, I mean,
yeah,
a lot of them are spending more time with the people they work with
yeah,
than their significant or intimate partners or relationships outside of this. I mean, how do
yeah.
we tell people like, hey, the person you're hanging out with the most, that you're working with the most, maybe grabbing drinks with the most, what behavior does come acceptable? I mean, because again, this is a topic or discussion we've never had to have before. Men and women never got to
Never.
spend this much time in a workplace before.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a clear description of consent that needs to happen. I think because a
Mhm.
lot of times, I think of Aziz Ansari, whose situation was a little different, but I guess this is it becomes blurry, right? Someone says non-verbal cues or verbal cues, but a clear, explicit expression of consent, and then definition of what professional behavior is and what things are. And if there's a no dating policy or there's dating policy, have the guidelines of this is what you do if you decide to date, or if you're trying to think of something, just this is what we should do here. And then if nothing happens, this is what we should do. And also there should be a policy that lets people know that whatever you do romantically or sexually should not affect your job, whether it's to climb up the ladder or make you lose your job. I mean, I think a lot of what was happening in Hollywood was you sleep to get a part or sleep to get a role, or the same thing that happens to other jobs. And that kind of stuff, is hard when the power dynamic is with the person that can give you the job. But we need to have more checks and balances, much like we have in government, where someone should be able to report to someone higher than another person or a council and say, this is what's happening, and it's from my boss. I don't want to get fired or get ostracized, but what do we do? And that takes investment, by the way. That takes money, yeah, and that takes
Yeah.
a commitment to say, this is our CEO, but this is the board or this is the council that it incorporates everybody from different parts that you can report to when something happens above the CEO, and you have to commit to that. But yeah, that's what I think. Well, we'll see. I'm sure my mind might change in the future, but as I work with more companies. But
Has it gotten any better? I mean, I haven't heard, maybe as much hype around or a lot of attention or news reports around, everything that's happened or gone on.
I mean, I think I'm inclined to say there's still room for improvement, but I'm also inclined to say that it's getting better, but that is much slower pace.
Yeah. Like I said, I haven't heard much,
Yeah,
if anything, of course, you're only going to hear is, hey, this guy has, for example, Harvey Weinstein has, messed with this many women and this has all happened. And wow, well, why are all these women coming forward now?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, nothing pisses me off more than that. That stuff really pisses me off. Where people, oh, why are you coming now? You could have come a long time ago. I'm like, come on, seriously? Are we? That's where we're arguing about the. But I don't know that I don't know if it's I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and with the companies I work, sometimes you have people tell me things in confidence. You can tell there's still room for growth. I think where we need to be at is we need to, like we keep saying, critical thinking. We need to practice moral courage to do the right thing, and we need to be big picture thinkers. We need to be able to think beyond ourselves and for long term benefits. And
You're asking people to be so unselfish right there. And
yeah,
so,
but
I mean, no, I'm saying with this idea that it's not about me.
it's not.
This is not of only solely affecting me and my decision I'm making. Isn't there's no repercussions on a lot more people. It's a big thing for people to do. It's a hard ask. Hey, if you don't do this, this is going to do, you know, that whole psychological quiz that, or mind game you do. Like, hey, there's a trolley going down the hill, and there's a woman on the tracks, and you're going to kill two of them, but you're going to save five.
Yeah,
One of them happens to be this, but these five guys you're going to save right here that you don't even know.
yeah.
Again, how do we tell somebody? I'm butchering the whole thought experiment, but
But that helps everyone though. That's the thing that people fail to see. It's
oh no, hey, I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. It helps everybody because again, I'll be the counter where it says, hey, I was wrongly accused of all this stuff. But
Mhm.
again, that's just the plain and simple thing is how do we lay out the culture, build a community and a conversation around everything happen?
No, so that no, I'm not, and I understood what you're saying because even with the devil's advocate approach is when you think of a big picture and you think of others beyond yourself, it's if we get past this point where we feel like what's this thing? Is it crab barrel or something like that? Where you know making space for more room on the table means less for me. um, I think that's such a false thing. I think people forget that when you have more ideas and more people in a room, yes, there's potential for more conflict, but there's also more potential for ingenuity, more ideas and productivity, and something that can even expand your pie. If you're a business and you think of how you can get into a larger demographic by being more inclusive, think about a marketplace that you could tap into. That's growth for your business. If you're in a movie and you saw what happened with Crazy Rich Asians and Black Panther, I think people underestimate because those are two demographics that people have said don't sell overseas. But when you finally give people a way to just be normal and not have to be caricatures and say that's the black person, that's the black, it's just them living their normal lives. You see what happens and how many times they come up in droves. Well, people forget that experience because the normal thing is always been it's predominantly white movie or any of that. We don't even call it a white movie. We just call it a movie. And when we call something else that's not that doesn't have a predominantly white cast, it's a black movie, it's a Hispanic movie, it's an Asian movie. But why can't it just be called movies? And so all those things that we forget, we're like, we have to retrain the world and understand that just like this predominantly white movies didn't affect your bottom line or didn't make you any less of anything, it's going to be the same thing when you sprinkle more diversity because that's just the way the world looks like. And the more the world sees themselves in things, the better it'll be. People underestimate the power of representation. Do you know how powerful representation is? I think back to my 10-year-old, 11-year-old self. If I found out that it was cool to just have my thick Nigerian accent at the time and to just be cool in a movie and there was some cool character that was like the coolest person, I would be like, yo, that's who I am. I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be like, trying to assimilate in some way at the expense of my identity. And so that's where I am with that. I think I think we need to get beyond ourselves because if we do that, we're going to see that it's actually going to just cause more unity, and it's also going to retrain our biases to just be more accepted, and then that's just more ideas and more growth. I guess that's how I see it.
No, I mean we don't know it's okay. We don't know it's okay to be ourselves, and the fact that we can share that message with people who've already been marginalized or don't have that space or platform, it it doesn't hurt anybody. No, I've just, it's again, I think it definitely comes down to the perceptions of how we see the world,
I, but exactly. So
and say, hey, no, I should be scared about this, or say, oh wow, this is a brand new take on a whole new idea I've never heard before.
open-mindedness. It's a funny thing, that word, but it's where we need to be.
Mm.
I mean, as kids, what you were very curious, I'm sure, when you were a kid. And
Oh, I mean, I've loved history like since I was a kid. That's what I studied in college, like an idiot. I just studied it because, oh, I read my textbooks from school, at home. Like I actually just love learning about history. I'm quoting Constantine from the year 315 in the Roman Empire in our conversation now.
I heard
Um,
that.
so I was just always fascinated by it. Indiana Jones, any adventure action type thing. It was like, oh, that's who I want to be. Get me a crack whip and a brown hat, and I'm gonna go find some lost relic in the middle of the jungle somewhere. I'm gonna connect with these people and that people. And those movies kind of cross cultures. You're
You
going to a
do.
strange new world that you're going to experience and connect with the people in a whole different way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and those are the friendships I had growing up. It was just a whole
Yeah.
new thing. And yeah, I think the toughest thing is connecting with people on that sign to say,
I think
hey,
so too.
I look at the world. I don't look at somebody this way. I don't look at somebody that way.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely have biases and I definitely have strong opinions about things, but there's a way to have a conversation. I think it's actually fun. It's actually fun when I do that, when I come back from traveling, especially after that South America trip. I talk with people. Hey, how's it going? Like I've kind of been away for a while. What's going on here? Or even any debate or conversation, because I feel like I run into like I kind of poke and pester and like look for those trolls and those people get mad, but I really don't attract those people even online. I don't run into those issues. Guess I'm a likable guy, but
You are a likable guy.
but when I start hearing somebody vet and complain, I don't like this, I don't like that, this is happening, that's happening, that's happening, like my black and whiteness is just says, hey, well, how does that make you feel? Like, where's that coming from? Like, why do you feel that way? Letting someone express themselves, whether they're whatever background they have or experience that or trauma they, letting someone let that out, hearing somebody talk about that, relating to what they went through and what they went on, and now you got them on that like relatable level to talk about how the world can be better, how that's going to make this situation better. And that's why I love podcasting. This is just a way different intimate conversation you can have with one person, two people, and the chance for you to be vulnerable on these things, for people to listen in, inspires others. Talking about keto constantly, we talk about influence on social media, and just people are like, hey, I'm starting keto. I'm like, well, why are you doing that? Well, I heard you talk about it over here, and I'm just like, that's so cool. It's so fantastic. That's just eating thing. Or it's like, hey, now I've been running 3 miles a day because you've been talking about doing more running or doing this exercise. It's like, we don't realize the change or impact.
Yeah, and we don't talk to each other enough.
I
I
know.
think,
If
yeah.
we have to do it over a podcast like this way, I'm fine with doing it that way.
No, it's fine. But no, it's true. If you think about it, even and I'm the biggest proponent. You and I are very digital fans, digital media fans. We promote that. Um, I, but even with doing research for the book, because the book is about connecting, so like connecting across cultures, connecting to self. I realized a lot of people don't connect with people. I mean, you have your phones in front of you and you sort of look at the news, even if you're right next to someone, but we've forgotten how to really find out what it's like to, be the new kid on the block and find out what the common ground is. Hey, you like basketball too? I like basketball. What was your favorite thing? What happened? And many times now, if you meet someone that have been friends for a few years, you're like, oh, I didn't know you did that. Well, yeah, I do it every Saturday. Really? Every Saturday? But yeah, but we always talk. Oh, yeah, I was over the phone. But we don't have those points of connection anymore that we could easily point back to.
Well, I mean, you can click on a hashtag now and message somebody, and I think that's become the problem with social media, is that people, like these mini tribes, the tribes we have in real life, have like migrated over to the internet. Little groups now where you say, oh, Republican, progressive, liberal, Democrat,
Yeah,
likes basketball, likes this. So I mean, like you said, it's great. The fact that you or I can go up and have a conversation like, oh, this person's just doing something really cool. If I want to talk to them and
yeah.
find out, like, wait, why'd you start painting this thing on the curb in New York City? It looks beautiful. I mean, who are you? Where you come from? Like, why do you do this? And the fact that we can do that with direct messages, I can talk to somebody in the Philippines right now about basketball.
Yeah.
I can get lost in a conversation on my cell phone. It's
Same.
a beautiful thing. And, we've lost a lot of our communication skills with these devices that they've allowed us to connect even more.
Yeah.
Instead, we've, retracted back again into our ideas onto
Yeah.
these devices.
Yeah. But I think you and I believe that we can even use, now that we know that that's the case, there's a potential for that. We can strive for deeper connection. Like you say, hey, let's jump on Zoom, or let's jump on Skype or something, or hey, I'm in your area, let's see if you can grab you can take that connection to a deeper level, or where it becomes something even deeper and doesn't stay surface. So yeah, that's where we are.
Okay, we're taking it to Ronaldo Messi. Our last
Ronaldo Messi.
bit. Why Ronaldo? I know you're a big Ronaldo guy, and I know after I posted that question, the Messis just came pouring in.
Gosh, it happens.
I'm not sided. I'm really down the middle. I'm a fan of the art form.
How are you down the middle? You gotta pick a side, Brandon.
That's what we're talking about. We can't pick sides.
I'm throwing everything I said. Look, this is an objective. We're trying to have an objective debate. This is who is better.
Remind you, let's see. I'm the mediator, and you're portraying this to my audience, your audience. Give us the case for Ronaldo.
Okay, so Messi is more naturally talented. Messi's won more team championships. But when I think about an ability for today's game and the adaptability of Ronaldo, from his adaptability of different positions, adaptability to go to different leagues and win, and the fact that he is always, more often than not, shown up to be the reason and the clutch guy that they won. In the Champions League for Portugal, I can't even bring Messi in the conversation, because I think Messi's the second greatest player in the world, but Messi is not.
Tough sell on those points right there, especially like in the international or the like rising to the top thing.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the fact that, one, Messi hasn't won internationally. Messi's always had the better cast, right? I mean, I don't know that anyone can argue that. When you have Xavi and Hernandez, I mean, there's no way we can even argue that Messi has never had to be the one to really change too much of his game in a way where it's completely different from when he started. That, to me, it allows me to just, I can't just say Messi is better, because I haven't seen him do anything in a different position. I haven't seen him in a different league. I haven't seen him without the best team in the world.
I would have loved to seen him get in the EPL. Like, that's one thing.
In the Premier League, or in just be somewhere else, so I can see if those skills translate. Because the Premiership is the most physical league. It might not be the best league, but it's the most physical league. But Ronaldo's done it. He won in Manchester United, won in Juventus. He
won the goal record with
goal record.
He had a crazy year with like 43 or 46 goals.
47. Yeah, and then he went to Real Madrid and he elevated his game. And he wasn't a winger or any of that. He became this player. And I am more in love with the idea of a player who basically made himself that person, because, like I said, Messi's more naturally talented, but you can see the amount of work that he's done to himself to essentially be the best player in his mind in the world. And him in the air, forget about it. Forget about it. And then what will be the last thing I'll say? I was trying to think there was one other point I had. Versatility, adaptability, international record. There was something else I wanted to add. It's escaping me. All those things add up to me. And yes, you can bring up all those. Oh yeah, the comp. I compare it to, it's like Ronaldo to me is like LeBron James, and Messi to me is like Kevin Durant before the injury, like right before the injury. Like Kevin Durant, some people were saying he might be the best player in the world. But Kevin Durant wasn't the Golden State Warriors. The team was already stacked. And then LeBron has always been, he has to be the reason that they win. And without him, they crumble. And that, to me, is very, very tough for me to find any argument against. So
that's a powerful comparison right there. LeBron to Ronaldo and KD to Messi. Wow.
Yeah. Like right before, like not the KD before, like the KD that was happening right before he got injured, where everybody was like, "Is this the best player in the world?"
Secretly, I definitely say I'm more on the Ronaldo side.
What? What? You picked a side?
No, I didn't pick your side before that. I felt that way, but like a millennial, I don't want to believe in anything, but I'm going to
Yeah.
take a stance here and say that, no matter the repercussions and the rebuttal that's going to come pouring down on me. No, I definitely would say, even like, emotionally as an athlete and player, definitely, as a basketball player, I've been is like I had to relate in those situations. I've had to be the guy.
Yeah.
And, when I was a lot of the places I've been to or played on, teams I was on, just situation I'm in, it was just like as that point guard, which is I think is the hardest thing to do, which makes it I think even harder for Messi to
Wow.
do those things, to be that guy. Because look at a point guard in the NBA. I mean, Steph Curry's done an amazing job at staying at that high level as a guard, but also he hasn't been able to have to handle dribbling the ball as an
Yeah.
MVP. You look at guys like Steve Nash. Hey, he had those 2 MVP seasons, and those are debatable MVP seasons. We can get on going against Shaq stats, back in the day.
Shaq never acknowledges those MVPs anyways.
Oh God, he's the worst on that. So you have Shaq stats, and then you also have, think about Isaiah Thomas just a few years ago. I mean, he had that one great season. I mean, and as a point guard, you have so much wear and tear, having to have the ball in your hands, having that big role and responsibility to get to here, to get to there, and for the team to rely on you. So I think Messi has it. Yeah, even Ronaldo in that aspect too, the same kind of difficulty. But he's always had that team. I think he's been safe playing in Spain. I don't think the
No,
Spanish.
that's all I'm saying. I think
It's
Messi's
that hard. I don't think it's that hard.
Well, see, that's the thing.
Again, I'm not a soccer player,
No, I'm not. That's the thing. I'm not. I'm not either. Because I don't want to dismiss. Look, you can. I'm sure you can give the amount of like. You could say he's a better playmaker. You could say he has slightly more goals. I get all that, but that Steph Curry and the Kevin Durant comparison is. I don't know. Maybe I've always been the underdog, but I always appreciate someone that can go to a team and just elevate that team. I wonder what would have happened if Messi left that team. That team would still be great. You kidding me? The Barcelona team was it 2009 team or 2010 team? Probably the best team I ever seen. I can't remember which year it was.
I mean, they just always had an incredible front three. You think about even like when he was younger, the Ronaldinho, Eto'o, and Messi with still an Iniesta, Xavi midfield.
You see. This is why I'm saying
Eric Abidal playing defense before the liver injury. I mean, they were.
And that's my point. And yes, this is something we can never find out. And I shouldn't punish someone for being in a great team and all that. But I'm just saying, I've seen someone do it on a different level, and I've seen someone had to change his game. That's like say LeBron trying to get a three, having to develop a 3-point shot, or having to figure out how to play with his back behind the basket, or having to figure out how to be a better ball handler, or all these things. Those are, when I see players do that, I'm like, yeah, that's greatness. Yeah. So, but I know I'm in the minority. Most people think Messi's better. I get it.
I'm still not a LeBron guy. I mean, I grew up on MJ guy. I mean, like
I know. It's okay.
Mean, like the thing that as a ball player too, it's that kill factor, man. It's that.
Oh my gosh!
Kill or be killed. I'm not saying he's not an incredible physical specimen, not a dominant individual, and I think he like Messi, also have this. They just do not get foul calls. They are just on such a different stratosphere physically or, with the creative gifts they have on the court that they do not get the same amount of foul calls. They do not get the same amount of things. Like just watching them, and then as knowing the tips and tricks that I did on the court, they get they get beat up. Messi, it's like 4 or 5 calls where him maneuvering around before he gets, like just a whistle. LeBron in the post just getting shoved in the back when there's an NBA that's so soft and doesn't have hand checking. Again, it leads toward greater offense. I'm not going to knock that. That's fantastic.
You know what you sound like? You sound like every TNT analyst right now. But which is still, by the way, it's the best sports show in the world, in my opinion. Okay,
they
so
win Emmys for a reason.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But so MJ, obviously, in your mind, since you are an MJ guy, do you agree with the narrative then that MJ will always be the best? Because that's what I seem to hear from whenever I hear people like yourself who grew up on him and everyone else. They're like, no, you don't even understand. It's never going to happen. MJ is just the best ever. It sounds like I'm hearing people say there's no other person that could come along that will change my mind. I don't know. I mean, you obviously you got to see him, so that's
I
a
mean,
good.
I'm open to it. I mean, yeah, it was
Are
like,
you though? Are you really open? You think you can? Okay, I don't know. I mean, because obviously I'm Jay's not.
I
But
mean, like I said, I got to not just grow up, but I got to go to several games. I
yeah,
mean, even as a kid, again, my parents never played basketball. However, they got this, as like any kid you have in your house, like, who is this lunatic just running around with this red jersey on his back? We've never heard of this Michael Jordan cat. And,
yeah.
now we're watching games. We have NBA League Pass. So, I mean, I think like even like the 72-10 season we watched,
Oh my gosh, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, yeah.
and it was just, growing up on that, you got the taste of like, oh, this is what it's like to never lose. Like when you watch that season, go back and just reflect on that season, like that's just greatness right there. Like, oh, this is 72-10. You get to see it with the Warriors, doing that 73-9. Like, oh, if this is the bar and this is where it's set, what else comes below that?
That was
And
scary.
I mean, just think about the winning the shot at the end of the game,
Yeah,
and just the percentage he had for doing that. Again, that's just, we're not even going to compare it to anybody else. It's like, that is where the bar's been set. Like, hey,
yeah,
and then you watch in the 72-10 season, just like, or in those playoffs, like in the 90s, wow, we're not going to lose. Oh, Michael's got the ball. Like, everybody's screwed.
wow.
It's Mike. It's Mike. Like, who is going to do that? So
Okay.
I think he just set the bar at just such an extreme level. And again, there'll be those people to say he didn't play against anybody, and it was this or that, or he had a team and he didn't have a team. That aside, I think just I'm reading that book right now, by his trainer. Um,
Oh,
um,
I know what you're talking about. I read it too. I read it last year, a year before.
Unstoppable,
Yeah,
or
something like that.
yeah. And it's just, as an athlete, I have those same, because again, I grew up on those Michael Jordan tapes. As a kid, Michael Jordan, come fly with me, Michael Jordan, this in the air. And there's always videos talking about like, hey, I just want to win everything. And he's talking about a very wholesome level, because kids are going to see this. He's not talking about Michael Jordan, the gambler, or Michael Jordan, how he talks to people on the basketball court. It was like, I played Monopoly, and I'm talking to the roommate. Yeah, Michael kept me up all night until he won a Monopoly.
That must have been, yeah. No, I trust me. I understand. It's just interesting because obviously that's the many people that share that opinion that would say Michael Jordan is basically
No, the problem is I took that on as a 5-year-old. I said, hey, if this guy doesn't lose and he wants to do this, then I have to do whatever it takes to win, in terms of I got to
you
work as
win.
hard as this guy. So, I mean, that's the thing I've been able to shrug off, as an adult now and not working in sports. It's like, how do I, put that part aside me, or how do I, like in that book, harness that cleaner mentality to
The
say,
cleaners, yeah, exactly. That was what he said.
take
Cleaner.
that stuff and become that hardworking, no one's going to beat me, I'm going to be the best in any, you know, business, or in any different physical fear I'm going to enter and try to go in.
Yeah, and the way that you feel about MJ, I think the way that obviously I grew up on LeBron because he was I started following him when I was 13 and when he was in college. When he was in didn't go to college, when he was in St. Vincent and Mary High School. And I remember, yeah, I used to print out, my first favorite player was Allen Iverson, and then it was LeBron. And so I used to print out all these papers. Back then it was the dial-up. So I used to print them out, and I would have a folder of all all the things they like. I remember I'll never say like butter pecan ice cream, like from Sports Illustrated for Kids, and I would just study all their habits or their daily routines because those things were readily available. I did that for tennis as well. But I think the thing that I've loved most about LeBron is his more than that he sees himself as more than an athlete. And the stuff he does off the court, whether it's with the school or enabling his
That's where
boy.
he's different. That's where it's
Yeah,
like really,
yeah,
really.
and then, yeah, yeah, and that's not even a basketball thing. That's the thing I've admired. Where whether Maverick Carter is, he's in the entertainment business, or Rich Paul, whether you like him or not. I happen to like him, but I know some people don't. As an agent, or Randy, all these people that he grew up with. I remember when he quit, or he fired his agent, and people said, "What are you doing? This guy doing what? You're just gonna not have the normal agents?" And I just love the ability to just do things uh, in a way that you're not defined by one thing. And from hearing my story, that's my big thing, not to be defined we're all we're all hyphenated people, potentially multi-hyphenated people. And so, yeah, for me, it's a combination of those things, which, by the way, to very old school basketball fans, is a distraction to other people. They're like, no, just don't do any other thing off the court. So it depends on how you see it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Michael's still the best. We've concluded. Gave it to Ronaldo in our conversation, but Mike just takes the cake.
Okay. Okay, fine. When it's all done, I'm still. Okay, fine. This is the side I want to see more of. I always said it. Fine. You know what? As long as you said LeBron James is the best, but I mean, sorry, you said Michael's the best. Yeah. I can. Yes, I think when. At this point,
basketball player. No, we're
not. At this point, Michael is better than LeBron. I will not deny that. I would deny it. And that felt so hard to say. It was so hard for me to say. But yes, at this point, I will concede that fact. But his career is not over.
No. It's not. I'm excited. We have such a great season. I know we talked about the Messi for Ronaldo, and that it's great that we all. And again, I don't think people like, oh, you're not enjoying them for what they are now, but I think people are. The fact that we can, like I said, have the soapbox, have debates with somebody, in the UAE over the internet right now, like, hey, Messi sucks, Ronaldo's the best, Ronaldo's the worst. That we can have those. It's really we are enjoying it, and the fact that we can highlight everything. It's like you said. Like I remember reading Sports Illustrated as a kid, and Sports Illustrated, or just the back of cars. I collected cards. It's like something that doesn't happen.
Yes, used to collect those cards. I remember.
I still have huge 3-ring textbooks. But kids today have an even more in-depth look. It's just in a different way. It's digitally that you can see someone's Instagram, and that's their new playing card right there.
Yeah.
That is what you're gonna know. It's not just gonna be their hometown and this. What Kevin Durant likes for breakfast every day now.
Exactly.
It's a whole new playing card. It's I just thought of it. It's really surreal. But back to what I was going to get into is that you have a book coming out, and that can come out in August.
Comes out September 4th. But
September 4th.
But I guess I don't know when the podcast will be out, but whenever it's out, I'd love for you to pre-order it. But the book is called Use Your Difference to Make a Difference, which is my mission statement, and it's on how to connect in a cross-cultural world, right? So everything that we've talked about, the different ways to find common ground, to navigate this nuanced world where you're either an educator, you're a parent, you're a change maker, or you're someone in the workforce. How do you make sure you develop those skills within yourself to be more culturally competent? And then what investigative skills and observation skills can you develop in ways to observe your society and grow? And then how can you communicate with people that have different values from you? A lot of research went into it. There are a lot of stories as well. And I would really, 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 really love you all to hit the order or pre-order button, depending on when this comes out. It'll help. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It's definitely my life's work. But yeah, to make a difference on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Let me know.
No, man, you said it right there. And that's going to be a whole nother conversation we're going to have. It's how do people agree on the same values? Because I learned that in, relationships and friendships, like, people come from different places, and if you even date people across cultures, like it's big. I mean, it's a whole different value system, and it's a huge nod to people who, a French and Indian couple who can get married and do that. I'm like, I've traveled. I've been around the world. Bravo. That's amazing right there.
It's a lot of work.
A lot of work.
And it's more work than you think it is, because it comes down to your everyday things. And like, wait, that's how you talk to people? Do you hug people like that? Or it's just very subtle things, and it becomes, it just adds up. And you're like, wait, it doesn't mean what you think of me. Yeah, and then it's, and I've been in that position, and you just had to eventually, I mean, it wasn't like anyone was a bad person. It was just some things was rubbing against the way you were, because that's not how I do things. And then, it can escalate. No,
it happens. I mean, I thought, being the most happy-go-lucky, just bright person, that it wouldn't matter. But like, no, there's just so many little subtleties that either you don't pick up on or you don't realize. Right. And it's, again, nod to everybody. And see how I just went right into that with the values. Like, I'm going to cut this because we're going to make
we can cut. But that's, all those things are also covered in the book. But it is a very, very hard work, and it does involve less ego, more openness, because that would be more opportunities, and it has to come from both sides. But yes.
Fantastic. Tayo, I hope, when you come out here, I'm going to be at that,
Events, please. Yeah.
your book talk you're going to have out here. And yeah, I think we could even do a little video piece about, you, the book, the values on a topic. We'll set that up. That's nothing that everybody on the podcast needs to hear. So
Okay.
I'm going to tune out and sign out. Tayo, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
the
you for
man.
having me.
You're the man. Glad that we're not just podcasters, but we're friends.
Yes, we are.
You're a great guy, and I love the message and just the work you're doing. It's
Thank you.
really important, and not to get negated. Coming from the side that's been a lot more exclusive, past. So keep doing what you do, man. It's a great message.
You
And
too,
to
brother.
everybody who tuned in, because I'm looking at the camera now, why Tayo's always been thinking I'm looking away. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the show. Remember, you go check out Tayo. He's on Instagram. He has his websites. The website I'm not going to remember off the top of my head because it's a UYUD management, and I want to make sure I get that right.
Or TayoRockson.com.
Or TayoRockson.com, so you can find out anything and everything about him there.
Yeah.
And you can find him on Instagram primarily at Tayo Rockson, and as well on Twitter at Tayo Rockson. I believe both of those things are.
Yeah.
And if you're new to the show, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm on the YouTube side now, so I'm pointing at all you guys there. And if I'm not pointing at you because you're listening to this, push that button. Push that button. And go ahead and let's continue this conversation. It's all about community. And if we are able to go out and say, hey, this conversation changed you, this conversation helped you in any certain way, or you hate me, you hate us, just go and let it out. We got to find out where that's come from. We got to find that place. I can take it. We can take it. So put that stuff there. And that's it, everybody. The bus is out. Thank you again for tuning in. Peace.
Peace.
170. All right. Right when you are. Yeah. Yeah. Secretly, I would definitely say I'm more on the Ronaldo side. No, I didn't pick your side. As a basketball player, I've been is like I had to relate in those situations. I've had to be the guy who played on teams I was on. Just a situation that I in. It was like as that point.
For those who